I shall start. So my name is Jen Cheney. I'm the Senior Director of Franchise Development for Right at Home. I help all of our existing franchise owners that are looking to sell their business. I also help our existing owners that are looking to expand their business. Then on the flip side, I'm also the one here that helps all of the potential buyers who inquire about resale opportunities. Chuck, Trevor, you guys want to go?
I'll go next. Hey, my name is Chuck Pretner. Thank you so much for joining us here. I am Director of Franchise Development, also with Right at Home. What I do is I work with folks that are interested maybe in exploring the idea of opening a new business, a new franchise. So I guide you through a in-depth evaluation process on what Right at Home is all about, but there's also a lot of kind of self-reflection on to see if business ownership and what we're all about is a good match for you, and we're a good match both ways.
Yeah, my name is Trevor Steenholt. I am essentially Chuck's better half here. I do the exact same thing that that Chuck does, and with that being said, I couldn't agree with him more. It's a process that we put you through here, and it's you taking a hard look at us and us taking a hard look at you to see if it's going to be the right fit.
All right, guys, thanks so much. John, you wanna say howdy here?
Well, I'm in Texas, so howdy's how we start anyway. So my name is Jon Searles. I actually went through corporate America for quite some time and bought a Right at Home franchise. I lived through the franchise process for almost 8 years and actually sold my franchise. So I guess I've been through the process that many of you are looking at.
And my name is Eric Little. I'm the Chief Development Officer for the company. And John and I are just going to have a little chitty chat today about his very unique perspective here. So I think you guys, the other smiling faces, you're welcome to stay on. But I think you're dropping off, if I remember correctly. Yep, they already are. There they go, dropping like flies. All right, so full disclosure, I like John and we're friends. And so this conversation is probably going to sound a lot like that. So John, as you mentioned, you are, and that's why we wanted you to do the call, right? This is the first of a two-part series. The second one's coming up on Friday. Your experience is unique and your perspective is unique because you've seen Right at Home and business ownership and the corporate world from all kinds of different angles. Like you said in your intro, you know, you've worked in the corporate world, you've bought a business, you've bought a franchise, you've sold businesses, you've sold the franchise now, and then now you actually are an employee of the corporate office, right? So I just think that having all of those lenses that you saw the world through in those different times in your life, I think just gives you a perspective that I think the audience would want to hear here. So maybe you could just start off by walking us through, you know, we don't need it all started on a little farm in Texas, but maybe if you could just give us high level, you know, some of the positions and companies that you've been involved with.
Right. Well, right out of college, I started working for a company called Bluebell Ice Cream, where I actually managed ice cream plants for about 20 years through a whole process with them for about 20 years. And during that time, we actually owned a small business. We actually owned a greenhouse operation. But after we sold the greenhouse and after I decided I wanted to get out of corporate America and kind of buy my own business, I went to go looking and found a minority partnership in a bakery. It's a commercial bakery, and I did that for about 6 years. But then after that, we had the opportunity to move back home to Waco, Texas, where my wife is from, and we had a business. Lived through a Jewish concentration camp and just fell in love with taking care of people. And I will say they were difficult people, but she fell in love with them. So when I guess it was the precursor to looking into home care. And I looked into the top home care companies and found Right at Home. And I'm a big time due diligence kind of guy. So I spent a lot of time looking into Right at Home, finding out about the company, the culture, the leadership. There was not a Right at Home in Waco, Texas. So it was a brand new venture, a brand new startup. And obviously through the years, I had kind of put some money aside with the thought of maybe starting my own business and being my own boss. had always kind of worked for somebody else. Even with a minority partner, I had a majority partner that I worked for. So when we moved back home, we started the office from scratch. Zero experience in it, zero clients, but really got excited and kind of, jumped feet first into owning a Right at Home franchise.
So the Waco internet struck there for a minute, I think, and you were frozen for a little while. I don't know if that was just on my end or on all of them, but I think I got most of that. Will you talk to me about when you made the transition from Bluebell into your first business ownership role, which I think you said was the bakery, right?
Right. Well, we owned a greenhouse first, but that
Oh.
was while I was with Bluebell. My wife ran it. But yeah, we bought a commercial bakery in New Haven, Connecticut. It was like moving my wife to another country because we moved to Connecticut from
Did
Texas.
they understand you up there?
They did. It took a while. They knew who my children were in the high school because I always said yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. But it was a great experience. Loved living that part of the country. But it was business ownership, and our skin was in it, and we worked hard at it and worked a lot of hours, and grew from a very small bakery to a large regional bakery that got purchased by a investment group.
So, I mean, where did that desire come from? What motivated you to even think about being a business owner when you were still in the corporate world?
Well, I'd always been, I thought, pretty decent at managing other people's assets and other people's business and other people's structures. And one thing that that we really wanted to get involved with is bringing something to our hometown. This is my wife's hometown. We knew we were going to move home.
Yeah.
There were businesses for sale, but I didn't want to just jump in and buy somebody else's business.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to jump back into the corporate world, which was available because I had decent experience in manufacturing. So we wanted to do something of our own, set our own hours, kind of set our own tone, set our own culture within our office. So Right at Home just seemed a natural fit for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So from your perspective, I mean, you've been in the greenhouse business, you've been in the bakery business, you've been in the Right at Home business. I mean, what are some of the differences in being a business owner versus being employed? Like what are some of the top 2 or 3 things that you can think of where you're like, oh boy, this part is really different?
Well, obviously the whole P&L process is different because it's your P&L, right? It's your livelihood. It's your thing. You also have to, I worked for a company that called themselves the Littlest Creamery in Texas, and it's a huge corporation. So they had a culture that they did, and same thing in our bakery. We had a culture that we did, but I had other people to rely on to help build that culture and build that world. Well, you're the leader in your business. You become the leader. You're the culture. You're the mood. You're the tempo of everything that goes on with your business day to day. So I think that was pretty interesting. And then, you're there when the lights come on, you're there when the lights go out, is how you really set the tone. And you also get to go out and find good people. I didn't have to take a manager that my boss hired for me, right? I got to take in some of my own people and build my own team. And that was a big deal for us too, was to build our own team.
So did you have this I'll call it the owner's mentality? Did you have that when you worked for somebody else? I mean, did you sort of show up with that mentality that, hey, even though I don't own Bluebell ice cream, I own my little team, and so did you think of it the same way, or did that evolve when you became a business owner?
Well, I think I've thought about entrepreneurship forever, right? But sometimes it's time, sometimes it's money. In my case, it was a wife and 3 children, so I had to make sure that I could afford that first, right?
Yeah.
So when our kids were, my kids were basically almost out of high school when we bought Right at Home. So it was that time of life where, okay, if we're going to risk, let's risk while we're still young enough, while we can still build something we want to build.
Yeah.
and get out there and stick our necks out a little bit. So I probably always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, but with a little bit of a safety net process in my mind.
Yeah.
So now that at that point, I could take a little bit more risk. And so my wife and I stepped out and purchased the Right at Home.
Was there, when thinking about to the greenhouse business or the bakery, was there ever a time in either one of those decisions where you thought, oh, this was not the direction I should have gone? You ever doubted it all?
Every time.
Yeah.
But every time we ended up doing well. The greenhouse was smaller. It was, about 150,000 revenue a year, but it's small bit, very small business. The bakery was much larger, and obviously I had a stake, but I was also an employee as well as a minority owner, so I still had a paycheck, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So we socked money away, and then when we went into Right at Home, it was the same thing. You do wake up sometimes thinking, gosh, did I make the right decision?
Mm-hmm.
But, it's that old attitude determines your altitude. And you got to go in with the right attitude, because it really is you driving your own success and your own bus and getting the job done.
So, I mean, it would have been, the easy decision would have been just to get a job somewhere, right? It would have been just to be employed and go get a job. And if that doesn't work out, I'll go get another job, right? So
Yeah,
how did you find, you touched on it a minute ago, but how did you figure your way out to get through this fear, right? Because there's a big sort of unknown over there on the other side of that purchase agreement, right? On the other side of that decision, there's a big unknown, and it becomes known pretty quick once you're in the business and you're working in it and you're doing all the things you need to do to run it. Were there things that you found helpful that you think back about how you got yourself over the fear of the unknown, the fear of failure?
When it comes to the franchisor itself, Right at Home, we did a ton of research. We asked lots of questions of a lot of people, and really in a way where I didn't pull any punches. I don't know, Eric may not remember my discovery day, but I didn't pull any punches that day either. I asked the difficult questions. I looked for the chinks in the armor. I looked for the sales pitch, that maybe sounded too good to be true. I looked for, I called quite a few owners that were already in the system, both owners that, the lady that I worked with that's no longer with your team, Eric, because she retired, but the lady that gave me names, and she gave me names of people that were happy and people that weren't always happy. And even the ones that weren't always happy were always complimentary of the franchisor. So by doing all that research in my world, I came to the realization that it was worth the risk. And there's always risk, right? It's a business ownership. It's risk. There's no guarantees. But when you have a good support team. So after the discovery day, we signed on the dotted line, and in September of 2012, we opened our office.
How did you talked about your research. How did you know when to stop researching?
When we answered all our questions, what my wife and I did is we sat down, we wrote down all these questions. Now, one of my questions was, what happens if it fails? Well, we had some work out. What happens if it fails? And then underneath that, you write, failure is not an option, right? So you have kind of that list of all these things you want to make sure of. And so we called everybody we could talk to. We looked for people that were supportive and people that weren't supportive. I had a lot of friends say, hey, you're getting all kinds of calls from headhunters. Why don't you just go work for somebody else?
Yeah.
We could move anywhere. Kids didn't really care. My wife would move anywhere. If she'd move from Texas to Connecticut, that's a big change. She'd go for another big change. So by answering all your questions, it was worth it. I mean, it really was worth the step out and do it. And I the way you explained it sounds like wasn't ever able to hold a job. I changed so often, but
I don't want to say it.
But it was just the right thing to do. And like kind of going backwards a little bit, there are days where we went, oh my gosh, we want to do this. But quite honestly, after a while, it started just really taking off and doing well, because we held tight to the mission and held tight to what we originally thought of in the beginning as far as our goals and our desires in building a business.
So, and I don't know if you said it earlier. How long did you own the Right at Home there in Waco?
A little over 7 years, right at 7 year mark, I think, is when we sold it.
So, how? I mean, were you for sale? Did you put the business up for sale? Was that a conscious decision?
It was. I'll be honest with you, and I didn't tell Eric this when I went through Discovery Day, but our goal, one of our goals on our paperwork, was sell after 5 years. That was on paper. Well, after 5 years, we found we still really liked it. We enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. But after about 6.5 years, we said, well, listen, my wife's parents were getting older. We really need to have Terry available for them. The business was doing extremely well because we had told ourselves if we were ever going to sell, we're going to sell while we were strong. And so we put it out there, but we put it out there with stipulations, which made everybody a little irritated in that we'll put it out there, we'll explain who we are, but we don't want to tell anybody where it is until they're ready to sign some paperwork, because we didn't want them to ruin our business. Because if we were in there for 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, or 15 years, we were getting out on top and not getting out when we wanted to. We were getting out because it was our goal.
Mm.
So we just didn't really tell anybody it was Waco, Texas, until the gentleman that purchased us signed on the dotted line and knew it was in Central Texas somewhere. But Central Texas is a big place.
So I hear it's a whole other country.
It is. It's a whole other country. So it's a big place. So it worked out really, really well that way. And it took us from the time we met the new owner until he took over was probably a total of 6 months. Mm. But it was really good. And, you know, even to this day, we talk, the owner and I, because he wants to, you know, use us as a resource if he needs to. And we're really excited about his success. He's continuing to do real well. So he's owned it now for pushing 7 months and doing quite well.
So do you have, as you reflect back on your business ownership experience at Right at Home, is there a favorite part of that business that you think about, or are there things like responsibilities that you had at various stages of your business's life cycle that you miss, or that you really just look back on and say, boy, I really like doing that kind of work?
I do. And maybe it's not so much work. I enjoy the stories. Yeah. I enjoyed meeting people. I met people that trained astronauts. I used to kid around that colonels from the Air Force were a dime a dozen, because I had almost a dozen on service at one time. They were amazing men and amazing women. I had one of the first Marines, females. I had one of the first Air Force female officers. She's actually still with us. She's 104, and she's still awesome. With the current owner. I met just some incredible people that also met some incredible people and lived some incredible lives. That's the part I miss, is sitting down with those people day to day. The only thing I did wrong in my Right at Home journey was I thought when I joined Right at Home, I could do this myself. They've given me the recipe book. I can do it myself. So I didn't really get involved with corporate much in my first 1.5 years, almost 2 years. That was a mistake, because there's so many resources and so many people there willing to give their time and their expertise to help you. And I probably could have gotten that Rookie of the Year had I just asked for a little bit more help up front. But yeah, but I miss talking to the folks I've talked to, the clients and the people and the stories and just all that they were part of our lives for 7 years.
Well, now you're on the inside here, so maybe talk a little bit about you sold the business and your buyer down there is doing well. Talk about the post-sale, I'll call it mentality, right? So you had thrown yourself into this business for 7 years. I know you and Terry took some time off, but maybe just talk about what you did after the sale and how working for us at the corporate office came about.
Well, it was one of those type of things where I did not, I didn't politic to work for Right at Home before I was selling, right? It was just one of those things. But I really liked the Right at Home. obviously Right at Home's in Omaha, and I wasn't going to move to Omaha because I live here in Waco. But you know, a couple things. I really like the company. I really like the industry, and I had all these shirts that said "Right at Home" on them. Right? I had bought so much bling. So from my standpoint, I just really like the culture and I really like the people. So I just floated the idea out there. I said, listen, if anything were to come up for an owner that was leaving ownership after 7 and 8 years, I had been on some franchisee leadership councils, been gotten more involved with the franchisor through my franchisee status. Really enjoyed. So I knew a lot of the Right at Home employees, a lot of the corporate employees. I knew a lot of the owners that are still in the system today. So I think I had something to give back, right? And so we were able to throw out a little bit of that, and it started as kind of a little bit of a tease back and forth between me and my current boss, Margaret Haynes, who is the COO. And she said, hey, why don't you come talk to me after you sell? So I did, and the rest is history. I was lucky enough to join Right at Home and help lead their corporate stores initiative.
And we talked about you for a while.
Yeah, I bet.
And we brought you on board anyway.
Anyway, that's right. Even knowing all my faults, that's right.
So, I mean, again, getting back to the topic of the call, I mean, it's a unique perspective because there are lots of people out there that join franchise organizations as franchise owners who never get to peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of the, you know, what's actually going on at the corporate office, right? You come to the meetings, even though it's all by Zoom, you're in the meetings. You get to hear all kinds of things probably that you didn't hear as a franchise owner. I mean, what's been the biggest difference for you, or the biggest takeaway for you of being sort of on the inside as opposed to being out in as a franchisee?
You know, you mentioned seeing behind the curtain. I'll be honest with you, it's not much different than what's in front of the curtain, and that's the best part about it, right? That's the best part about Right at Home is the leadership and the people, and it's a very open, positive, you know, not to sound cliche, but family type culture that is not just facing towards those that buy franchisees, but it's also inside the whole franchisor process. So it truly is a team. It's not, you know, the folks are accessible. They say what they mean what they say. So I really haven't found anything that I didn't already know or change my opinion, other than it verified that my opinion was correct from a franchisee standpoint.
So I'm interested to hear your answer to this last question that I've got for you here. We talked to a lot of prospective franchisees over the years, right? I mean, and most of the people, all the people really that we're talking to are where the folks that are listening live today and the folks that listen to this on a recorded basis are, right? They're at a, you know, in a fork in the road, and it may not be the only one, but it's a career transition fork in the road, right? They can go get on their job, they can stay in their current job, they can own an independent business, they can buy a franchise. There's all different paths out there, and you've taken, you know, quite a few of those forks. And so we talk to a lot of people that are about being proactive, right? Rather than letting your career happen to you, being purposeful and intentional about the choices that you make when you make them. So, you know, being intentional about wanting to own a business, being intentional about wanting to find a job in a specific industry. As you think about the transitions that you've had along the way, were those happening to you? Were there outside forces that were causing those things to happen to you in your career, or were they part of your, even though it may not have been all thought out, or were they part of your plan all along to kind of progress in the way that it did?
Well, my wife and I started a family young. So first we had to have stability. So stability was corporate America, and that's just the way it was. Mm-hmm. But we always had the thought that we were going to open something. And we really, truly enjoy working with people. I didn't want to sell a widget or anything, you know, that I needed to go door to door and sell. But I really wanted to get involved with people when it was all said and done. And what a better way to get involved with people is through, you know, doing care, right? It's
Right.
it's probably the closest thing you can do. You know, obviously we're not doctors and nurses, but there's a huge gray area of care in
Mhm.
between the layman and the doctor and nurse, and that's where we come in with Right at Home. So we were able to guide people, really work with people. But as far as, you know, I couldn't have told you 36 years ago that I would be in home care today. Um, just like I couldn't tell you how strong my Right at Home would have been when I opened the doors. But again, if you're purposeful and you have that focus on wanting to own your own business, being your own boss, setting the own tone, and want just a little bit of risk in your life, not just get comfortable. I think I've always been one that I just don't want to get comfortable. I mean, finding a job was never really much of an issue. It was always, am I going to enjoy the job while I'm there? And I've truly enjoyed everything I've done. To go from working there for 7 years to now doing what I'm doing now, I get to stay part of an industry I really have enjoyed.
Just as you were talking there, I'm kind of reminded, and I can't remember where I picked this up, and I have this problem a lot. I don't know if somebody told it to me or if I read it somewhere, but there was a story I'd heard about, you know, somebody went to work just had a great first boss in their corporate world career. They said, you know, when you start in the corporate world, they give you 2 buckets. You know, one bucket is for, I won't use the word on here, but frustrations, and one bucket is for money. And that person, whoever it was, told them that when one of those buckets gets full, either one of them, that's when you need to go do something else. And I think that what's what you're talking about, you know, it's that sort of getting complacent, right? Getting comfortable in your career. I think there's a lot of people that's okay, but there's also people that say, I want to be proactive and I want to accomplish something more than just working for somebody else. And again, no problem with either one of them. It's just a matter of tapping into what you want to do as a person.
Right. And one quick little note in my Right at Home in that we took care of, you talked about your first boss giving you an idea of how things go. We had the honor of actually caring for one of my first bosses who reached a specific age, and we provided care. He had a form of dementia, and when I walked in to see him, everybody said, well, he's not going to know who you are. And he immediately looked at me and said, Jon Searles, Searles.
Wow.
And somehow he remembered me, and we took care of him until he passed away. So, you know, there's no telling how that world's going to come around. He might have prepared me to get to this point.
Yeah.
But
You probably knew him when you had hair.
he had hair all his whole life. He was in his 90s. He still had hair.
I was about you.
Oh, not me. No,
You still,
he didn't know me
still
when I had hair.
recognize it.
It left early.
Well, folks, we've got, and I should have said this at the top of the call, we've got the Q&A function turned on here. So if anybody would like to ask a question, we've got just a couple minutes here left with Jon. So if there's something that you want to hear him talk about, now's the time to post your question out there. So Jon, I'll kind of wrap up with this unless we have another one pop in here. I mean, we've got folks that are going to listen to this on a recorded basis. We've got some on the phone today too. They're at all different stages. I mean, some of them are, you know, they're furloughed right now, right? I've got friends that are every other week, they get a paycheck now instead of every week or however it was before. I've got some that are, you know, we've got some folks that are laid off. We've got some folks that are doing just fine, but they've also got uncertainty out there because we don't know where this pandemic is going to go. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy and the job market. And so I don't know. I say all that to say this, to ask this question. I mean, as you think about folks that are in career transition today in the middle of this pandemic, are there words of advice that you would offer up to any of those kind of folks that are looking at this uncertainty going forward and wondering, you know, is now the right time to be thinking about opening a business?
Well, I do have a unique perspective because right now we're managing 4 locations overall as far as Right at Home locations are corporate owned. And those offices are all growing. And those are all obviously corporate employees, but they're all growing. They're all excited. They're seeing what's happening in the world today. We've adapted to it in the proper way. We know how to work with COVID positive clients. We know how to work in a COVID controlled environment. So I think we've adapted to that in a way that still allows for growth and business. So I think that's something, you know, if that's the excuse for not opening, I think that that might be a mistake. So whatever your excuses are for not starting your own business, I would have really reached a point of regret for not opening my own business had I not done it when I did it 7 years ago. You can always find reasons not to open a business, right? But looking for the reasons to do it, it was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it and still enjoy being part of the Ride at Home group.
I think that is a perfect note to end on, my friend. I don't see any other questions coming in here, so I'm going to close that window. Thanks again for attending today, everybody. John, this is part one. You and I are going to do this again on Friday, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into the topic.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Bye for now.
Bye, guys.